Flash can either completely save your wedding day photos or absolutely destroy them. Today we're going to go over how it is that I incorporate on-camera, off-camera flash during the weddings that I am shooting, and how you can make your flash look a lot more natural instead of like a 2007's point and shoot. Now, in case you haven't seen my videos before, my name is Brandon. I am a professional wedding and portrait photographer located in the central Midwest. And today we're going to talk about one of the biggest things I see newer wedding photographers struggle with, and that is when to use flash and when not to use flash. A lot of newer wedding photographers struggle with knowing when to use it. They're either terrified to even use it or don't realize how important it is to be incorporating flash in wedding photography. So in this video, I'm going to walk through different parts of a wedding and go through when I'm using natural light, when I'm using on-camera flash, and when I'm using off-camera flash. So during the get ready portion of photos, I try my best to not use flash at all. It's kind of a relaxed environment for the most part, where it's just people getting ready. And I try to keep that a very chill experience. I don't really want a flash going off all the time or make it seem like it's a photo shoot. I don't want them to even think that I'm there taking photos. I want to be a fly on the wall. Now, one of the prime examples of when I would use a flash during get ready is when I'm doing detail shots. So generally with detail shots, if I don't have good natural light to be able to set up at, set up near a window or something like that, I'm going to use on-camera flash with a bounce card to be able to create some type of shadow. Or what I will do is I will use a remote on my camera and I will hand hold the strobe itself and be able to get the shadows a different way. Something like that, something creative for those detail shots. During the get ready, I try my best to use natural light, find a window in a hotel room that's got a good diffusion from the curtains or the blinds that are on it. Now, if I absolutely have to use flash, I will use it, but I try to keep it as low as I can, and I use it as sparingly as I can. I just don't want to ruin that time when they are trying to get ready and just trying to kind of hype themselves up for the wedding by introducing a bunch of blinding flash. Now, if you do find yourself needing to use flash during get ready, let's say especially in a dark hotel room, or I've been in hotel rooms before that have those horrible yellow lights and it's just throwing the white balance off all over. Do make sure that you're using either a bounce card or using a bounce method where you're bouncing the strobe off of a wall and not directly into people's eyes. Now, the ceremony. For the most part, most wedding photographers avoid using flash during a ceremony. There's also going to be a lot of places that won't even allow you to use flash. A prime example of that is a church ceremony. I've shot a lot of Catholic wedding ceremonies, and you are absolutely not allowed to use flash during that ceremony. Now, what I do in those darker situations is I'm using prime lenses, using something that opens up the aperture a lot further, allowing in a lot more light. And I'm going to turn up my ISO. At the end of the day, I've got to get the image. If I've got a little bit of noise in it, most of the time it can be cleaned up in Capture One. I know Lightroom's got a great denoise on as well. Myself, I use Capture One, but it does work very well. Now, I'm not saying don't use flash at all during a wedding ceremony. I do my best to avoid it, but sometimes there are situations where it has to be used. A great example of it was actually a wedding that I just shot this previous weekend. They were lined up in front of windows that had the sun coming directly into it. Now, I'm not talking just a couple windows, it was an entire wall of glass. So even if I exposed to the subjects, I was getting the background blown out so much that it just looked unrealistic. So the only way I was able to get the photos exposed correctly, get the subjects to kind of pop off from that bright, harsh light that was coming in from behind them, was to set up strobes on either side facing towards them. Now, when I set these strobes up, I keep them up as high as I can and not pointed directly into their faces. I'm not angling them down at their faces. I want them up high with I'll use a reflector dish with a grid on it to keep it kind of focused. I don't want it, I don't want it spreading out onto the guest. I don't want it blinding any of the bridal party that's standing up there. So either keep it up high or bounce it off of the walls, depending on the shape of the walls, the color of the walls. Just anything you can do to really keep it minimal with blinding them with a flash. But sometimes you've got to do it. And I talked to my couple, I let them know, and they said, hey, you do whatever you need to do to get the photos. They came out great. Again, I'm not a huge fan of using flash during the ceremony. I want to keep it nice and quiet, and I want to be a fly on the wall and don't want to interfere. But at the end of the day, we're still paid to do a job, and we got to know how to use that flash to accomplish that. Now on to the section of family photos, couple photos. This is where I am almost always using flash of some sort. When I am doing group photos with, say, the family, I'm almost always using on-camera flash. Now, something that I see a lot of photographers doing all the time is using direct flash. Now, what I mean by that is on your on-camera, having the flash pointed directly at them. This is something that I avoid at all costs unless I'm trying to actually get that direct flash look. But for group photos, that's not something I'm gonna be doing. Generally, the way I have it set up is I've got it pointed upwards, and I'm using a diffuser dome on it to get the light to spread out. I'll either use this one or I've got a larger one on it. Just kind of depends on the situation, but for the most part, I find this magnetic little diffuser dome to work fantastic. That, or I'm going to be bouncing it off the walls, off of the ceiling. I'm never gonna have it pointed directly at them. Now, something that I love about the Godox V1 Pro is if I'm using it, bouncing that light, I've also got a little light here in the front that's just a little fill to help fill on the shadows on the face. Not really bright enough to be absolutely blinding, but it does fill in those shadows really nicely. Now, off-camera flash, I generally use for couple portraits. I'm gonna be running a Godox 8200 Pro with, I think it's a 90 centimeter parabolic. It's parabolic style softbox. I usually use those for the couple photos to get that more high contrast kind of art look photo. That's about the only time that I really use off-camera flash when photographing people in a group situation. I'm not using it for, as I said, I'm not using it for big group stuff unless I absolutely had to, but it's been a long time since I've run into a situation where I had to use off-camera flash to light a group. Now, one of the reasons that flash is so important when you are shooting photographs of a group is because you're going to have to close up your aperture some. When you're shooting a group that's stacked together, you can't be shooting at 1.4, 1.8, 2.8. Usually I'm shooting around a 5.6 to a 7.1 to an 8 when I'm shooting a photograph of a group, depending on how many we've got stacked there. We've got to have that good depth of field. But in doing that, we're lessening the amount of light that can get to the sensor on the camera. So we need to use flash to be able to bring up the brightness, to add that brightness to it, to be able to capture the photo to correct exposure without cranking the ISO on the camera. Now, on to the reception entrances and the dances. We're talking about, usually the reception entrances are right before dinner where the DJ is going to be announcing the bridal party and then the bride and groom, and they come into the room. During that, it depends on what the lights are like in the reception hall. Again, I try to avoid using any type of flash for that because I'm trying to get those photographs as they come in there. You got a lot of the people in the bridal party are gonna do dances and weird fun stuff like that, and I really don't wanna be blasting them with flash. But again, it's all dependent on the situation. If they've already dimmed down the lights to have it more of a dance style, I'm gonna have to use flash. So again, I'm gonna use the on-camera flash with a dome on it, nothing pointed directly at them. Now, during dinner or usually after dinner is when they do speeches. Again, I try to avoid using any type of flash because that's usually a very emotional time. You're gonna end up having somebody who's gonna be crying. And the last thing we wanna do is mess with that emotional time by just blasting off flash. Again, though, it is one of those, depends on the situation. Just try to use the light that's available to you. And as I said earlier, a prime lens with a larger aperture is going to help out greatly. Get the ISO up. newer mirrorless cameras can take higher ISO, and any of the programs that we're using for editing are able to clean up that ISO. And even Capture One is in a beta right now that they introduced a new noise reduction tool to it that's an automatic. Click it, cleans it up. Works amazing. Now the first dance. This is the couple's first dance. We've got the lights down. Maybe the DJ is putting a little bit of color to it. I am always going to use off-camera flash during these. This is one of something I have a lot of people request. They see it in my portfolio and they want photos like this. But I'm setting up two 80-200 Pros, kind of kitty corner from each other. But again, up high, pointed straight across, not down at the couple. What you're able to do with this though, is when the couple is dancing, you can line them up with one of the flashes directly behind them. That's gonna backlight them, it's gonna give a little burst, stuff like that, while the other strobe is giving a good exposure to their face. Always be running in manual. If you can, try to use an assistant or grab one of the bridesmaids and get that set up. Before it, as you get your stand set up, say, hey, I need to test these lights real quick. I need to get my exposure set correctly. Could you please come and stand right here and let me do that? Majority of the time, you're gonna have no problem being able to find somebody to be able to get that set correctly. I just don't wanna be doinking around with my settings while they're doing their first dance, which is only gonna last about 3.5 minutes. Make sure you get it right before they start dancing. And now, open dancing. This is where, again, I always have flash. I'm gonna be using on-camera flash, and this is the only time that I will do direct flash. I'm usually running a 14mm lens and something like the Godox IT30 Pro. Nice little compact direct flash. With this, what I am going to be doing is doing shutter drag stuff. I'm only using the flash to freeze the subjects and be able to get a shutter drag of all the lights from the DJ. These are awesome photos. They're a lot of fun to do. And again, this is the only time that I'm gonna be using flash that I am firing it directly at people. But I'm not gonna use something like my V1 Pro. The V1 Pro, I think, is it's like 78 watts or something like that. So it's a lot more powerful than something that I actually need. That's why I prefer using the IT30. It's a little less harsh on people's eyes to be shooting that at them. But also, I'm not standing at a point where I am eye level with them. I usually have the camera up higher so that I'm getting kind of a bigger, wider field of view of the dance floor to be able to get those shutter drags and stuff like that. Or I'm back a little bit, maybe down lower a little bit. It's nothing where I am directly into their face firing a flash off. That's one of my biggest things is I really don't like trying to fire a flash in a direct way straight in somebody's eyes. We've all had, I think everybody's accidentally set a flash off right in their face, and it's not a pleasant experience. So I'm not gonna do that to anybody out there on the dance floor or during any part of the wedding. I'm always trying to avoid direct flash. Now, sunset and night portraits. I am always big into getting the couple to do sunset portraits. I think they are great. I think they're a great looking portrait, and a lot of my couples really like them. And again, this is where off-camera flash is gonna come into play. I'm again going to be using the Godox 80-200 Pros in a parabolic style softbox. Now, just one light. Get it set up correctly, and again, this is another great time to either have your assistant or grab somebody from the bridal party or anybody, come outside and get that all dialed in. We're running on manual there, so I wanna make sure I have it set in before I go grab the couple. Now, the reason I do that is because I don't wanna be wasting any of the couple's time trying to get my exposure set up right, trying to get the stand set up right before I take the photos. I want to have everything ready to go before I grab them so that I can get them outside and take 10 minutes or less to be able to get these photos for them. Now, some of the biggest mistakes I see photographers using when it comes to flash. The biggest one, in my opinion, is direct flash. I see this all the time, that they're not using any type of bounce. Now, there's some situations where it's a little harder to use any type of bounce. You've got dark walls, or like some of those barns that they'll have wedding receptions in, just don't work well for using a bounce flash. But that's where it comes into play of using a bounce card. If you don't have suitable walls to be able to bounce a flash on, then get that bounce card on there and use that. There's no reason why you shouldn't have something like this. A lot of flashes have them built in, or in the case of like the V1 Pro, these cost $10. To have one, have it in your bag. Many different options out there for bounce cards. That's just what I have. But I don't like seeing people constantly using their flash directly at them. Just the other day, I'd seen photos from a DJ, and I could see the photo of the photographer while the couple was out there on the dance floor. Looked like she was using a 35mm lens, flashed directly at them while they're dancing. And I think she's standing maybe 2-3 feet away from them and firing a flash directly at them. Don't do that. Another one is just not really understanding how to use flash. Using on-camera, off-camera flash is something that really needs to be practiced. Using flash and bringing down the ambient light so you have that darker background is definitely more of an artistic thing to do, and it's up to you if you want that or not. In my opinion, there are situations that you do absolutely want that. I do it a lot with my portrait stuff. But when it comes to like group photos or just kind of candid photos out on the floor if I need them, I'm not gonna really bring down that ambient. I just want the flash to add a little more to them or help bring them out of a shadow when I'm in a room that's full of glass and it's just has a ton of ambient light coming from the outside and is causing way too many problems. I don't want to overpower that light. I just want to add light to them to increase the depth or expose them correctly because of harsh outdoor lighting. Now, at the end of the day, flash is nothing more than another tool, but it's a tool that I think every single photographer needs to understand how to use. I see so many photographers these days that don't use any type of flash. And I just don't think that's right at all. You see them all the time say, oh, I'm just a natural light photographer. Anytime I hear somebody say that, all I hear is, I have no clue how to use flash. Photography is all about lights and shadows. And as a photographer who's going to be charging people to take photos of them, you need to know how to create those lights and shadows yourself when the situations call for it. The weather's not always going to be perfect. You're not always going to have that absolute perfect sun to be taking photos. You will be in situations that have tons of different mixed lighting that you are going to need to now control the lighting. So understanding how to use on-camera, off-camera flash is extremely important. So make sure you do your research. An on-camera flash doesn't cost too much. You can pick up some used AD Pro 200s for $200, $250. It's a great investment and it's going to set you apart when you understand how to use flash. Now, if you have any questions about this, leave a comment. Hit like and subscribe. I try to put out videos like this once a week as my schedule allows me to. Obviously, I am a working wedding photographer and I am definitely in my busy season right now. So I just try to quickly make these videos and get them up. Get down in the comments, ask any questions that you have. I'll try to respond to all.